Father Alexander Rentel is Chancellor of the UFCA and has taught Canon Law at St. Vladimir's Orthodox Seminary for many years. Father Alexander is one of just a handful of Orthodox academics whose focus is on the canonical tradition of the Orthodox Church. I know there's a lot of interest in the canons and in the canonical tradition, and so I was really glad for the opportunity to sit down with Father Alexander recently. So without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy this episode from my interview with Father Alexander Rentel.
Orthodox Canon Law, and I will explain what I mean by this momentarily, but I think more properly termed the canonical tradition of the Church, refers to the reflection, but especially the application of a corpus of texts that are legal in nature, certainly in language. In many cases they're actually probably drafted in their final form by lawyers, by jurists. And it's the process of reflecting on the meaning of these texts and seeking applications to contemporary problems vis-a-vis this reflection. So especially the Orthodox canonical tradition seeks to resolve issues based on the interpretation, the study, and the consideration not only of these texts, but especially with these texts, but also with regard to the entire life of the Church. Now I say canonical tradition because canon law, the Greek word for canon law is nomokanon, which refers not especially to anything else, but, well, it's come to mean something else, but it especially originally meant the compilation of canonical texts, of church canons, side by side, pertinent secular law. So canon nomos. And the nomos were drawn from secular world imperial legislation, primarily, on matters that touched on ecclesiastical affairs, property, clergy discipline, things in which the emperor, the imperial might, saw fit to legislate on. And these were compiled in one book, and they formed a nomos canon, nomokanon. It's important to keep that in mind because often when people think of the word canon law, or those words canon law, they think of canons have the force of law, and they're led too easily into a temptation of interpretation that canons are just like laws, just like the experience that we have when we go to court, or we deal with lawyers, or something with regard to the state. The interpretation, the application of the canons, while having a certain legal character, especially with deep inheritance to the Roman legal tradition, shared vocabulary, shared form, things like this, there's an overlap with legal sciences, but it's not the same. There's ultimately a different hermeneutic. There's often a different way of looking at these texts than you would with any sort of legal text in the world. Primarily, that revolves around faith in Jesus Christ. We've not simply replaced the Mosaic law, the law of old, with a brand new law that we have created, because of course we've been freed by the law. But as Paul says in the end of the book of Galatians, he says, peace and mercy upon all those who walk according to this rule, this canon, meaning exactly to walk according to the new creation that was wrought by the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So this canon, and the canons themselves, and part of the canonical tradition, the canons themselves are theological texts with put in a legal framework. I like to tell my classes, just like, you wouldn't study the epistles of Paul and say, what great epistolatory merit these have, great way to study the antique letters. Yeah, he of course follows late antique letter writing style, I believe. I'm not an authority on that, but I believe. In the same way, the canons are theological texts written in a legal manner. We have, in terms of the text of the canons, almost all of them, with a few exceptions, have no doubt been went over by notaries, people trained in grammar, rhetoric, legal sciences even perhaps. With only a few exceptions, this is by far and away the situation that we have with regard to the canons. So what is Orthodox Canon Law? It is the reflection looking towards application of these texts within the broad tradition of the church. Hence my preference for the word canonical tradition. Why, though, why is canon law or the canonical tradition, why is this important in the life of the church? I think it boils down to, why is anything canonical in the church? And here I don't just mean the canon text, but why is anything canonical in the church? Because we believe if it is for the church, it is of the church, and if it is of the church, it is of Christ. So the canons themselves, we can be assured, have something, witness to, are authentic to the life of the church, that is to say, of Jesus Christ. And so they are authentic testimonies, witnesses that have been handed down by faithful men, primarily, through the centuries for use of the church.
Hi again. Hope you enjoyed this episode from my interview with Father Alexander Rentel. Please subscribe to get notified when new videos become available. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider becoming a patron of this channel. There's a link to the patronage page of our website below this video. Thanks so much for your support, and we'll see you soon.